My daughter tried selling my house from under me after her husband lost $150,000 in poker. You're moving to a nursing home now? She screamed across the kitchen. I just stood there, numb, as the blood drained from my face and my fingers dug into the countertop for balance. I replied the only way I could in that moment. I smiled tight and controlled and said, "Your fool won't get a penny." It had started 2 weeks before that when Emma called me out of nowhere and said she was bringing Brad over to talk about something important. I should have known then. She never visits without a reason, and if I'm being honest, she hasn't really visited since she married him. Brad walked into my house like he owned the place, with those loud, heavy shoes and that synthetic cologne he always wears too much of. He didn't even say hello. Just dropped onto the armchair in the living room like he paid the mortgage. Emma kissed my cheek with that fake smile she's been rehearsing since her 20s. Mom, sit. Please. Hold on a moment before we move. Forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. Sad. Because I wanted to believe that maybe this would be something light news about a vacation. Maybe even a grandbaby. Something human. But at WASN single quotes to Brad took the lead. We're in a bit of a situation. He started. A temporary one, and we thought it would make sense to all of us if we just moved things around a bit financially. Emma reached out and touched my hand like she used to when she wanted money for shoes in high school. What Brad means, Mom, is that it's time to downsize. That house is too big for you. You're all alone in it. It's not safe, and frankly, it's just sitting there doing nothing. That's when it clicked. What kind of situation? I asked. My voice was calm. I looked directly at Emma, not him. She shifted. Brad made a few investment decisions that, well, didn't work out. But we can recover if we act quickly. It's not a lot, just a matter of access. I could feel my teeth grinding, but I kept my voice low. You want me to sell my house? Brad didn't flinch. It's not about want, it's about practicality. You don't need this place. You found a very nice assisted living community. It's beautiful, actually. No, I said. Emma's face hardened. You're being irrational. I said no, I repeated. I'm not moving anywhere, and I'm not selling this house. That's when she lost it. She stood up so fast, her chair tipped. You're moving to a nursing home now? Her voice cracked at the end. We're not doing this again, Mom. We talked about it. You're not safe here, and we need that money. You're just sitting on it. Brad stood up too, folding his arms. It's not like we're asking for anything crazy. We're already found. A buyer. I blinked. What? Emma picked up a folder from her purse and tossed it on the table. Cash buyer. Fast close. They're giving above market. We already have the inspection scheduled. Our fingers went numb. You what? You're not thinking clearly, Mom, she said. This is why it's time. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood up, walked to the sink, and poured out the coffee I hadn't touched. I stared out the window at the yard Brad said was too much for someone my age. The grass was dry, yes. But it was my dry grass. The fence was chipped, but it was the same fence I painted with my late husband in 1987. Get out, said without turning. Mom, Emma began. I turned. You heard me? Get out. She glared at me. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You already did, I replied. They left. Not in a hurry, not ashamed, just annoyed. Like I was an inconvenience. The next morning, a woman from a real estate agency knocked on my door asking if she could come in for the pre-scheduled tour. I told her the tour was canceled. She gave me a confused look and then showed me a listing on her tablet, my house. My house with photos from old Christmases still hanging on the wall in them. I spent the rest of that day in silence, walking from room to room like a guest in my own home. They had taken photos without asking, uploaded them, priced the house. Scheduled tours, they were moving ahead like I didn't exist. Like I was already dead. Emma didn't call that night. Neither did Brad. 3 days later, I got a call from an estate relocation coordinator. The voice on the other end was cheerful, professional, and cold. She said she was confirming the scheduled transition support and asked if I needed help packing essentials or arranging for my medications to be transferred. I hung up. Then I sat down in my kitchen, opened my drawer, and took out the folder I kept my husband's papers in. I hadn't looked at them in years, but I remembered where everything was: deed, title, our wills. I also remembered the name of the lawyer who helped us put everything together back when Emma still wore braces. I called his office. He said he'd retired, but his daughter had taken over the practice. I explained everything. She told me to come in first thing in the morning. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't anymore. At the law office, the next day, I brought everything. Every document. I've even brought printed screenshots of the listing. I told her the truth. My daughter was trying to sell my home behind my back to cover her husband's poker debts. The lawyer didn't flinch. She asked 2 questions. Is the house fully paid? And is the deed in only your name? And yes, that's when everything began to change, she suggested. I transferred the property into a trust, one that couldn't be touched, not even by me, without legal process. We set it up that week, quietly, quickly. The calls from Emma stopped, but the paperwork didn't. I received an envelope marked urgent 3 days later. Inside was a formal request for me to vacate the property for necessary repairs and staging. Signed by Emma. Co-signed by Brad. There was no note. Just a deadline. 2 weeks. That same day, my lawyer called to confirm the trust was finalized. The house was no longer in my name. It now belonged to the trust, and I was the sole beneficiary and trustee. I smiled for the first time in days. I didn't tell Emma, not yet. Because sometimes silence is the most powerful response, and sometimes people forget that the woman they tried to erase still remembers where everything is. I didn't hear from Emma for 5 days after I received that notice. Not a call, not a text, not even one of her passive-aggressive voicemails she used to leave when she was annoyed. It was quiet, too quiet, and I knew her well enough to understand that silence wasn't peace, it was preparation. She was waiting, regrouping, probably talking to Brad, probably strategizing, but I wasn't sitting idle either. After I set up the trust, the lawyer, her name was Marla, advised me to document everything. Every contact, every visit, every envelope, every word. So I kept a notepad on the counter and wrote down every detail I could remember from the past 2 weeks. I printed emails, took screenshots of text messages, and even went outside to take photos of my property before Emma or Brad could claim anything about its condition. On the 6th day, it started. It was a little before 8 a.m. when a man I didn't recognize knocked on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a clipboard and a bright orange vest. He introduced himself as being from the city, here for an inspection on behalf of the listing agent. I didn't open the door. I told him, through the glass, that I was not selling the house and that any listing involving this address was fraudulent. He shrugged. I'm just doing what's on the order, ma'am. I called Marla right after he left. She confirmed what I feared. Someone, most likely Brad, was using an outdated listing to push things forward. The trust had been filed, but it would take a few more days to show up on public property records. In the meantime, Brad and Emma were acting like they still had a chance to finish what they started. That afternoon, Emma finally called. I picked up because I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to know how far she was willing to go. Hi, Mom, she said, like nothing had happened. I've been meaning to check on you. Have you? I said. There was a pause, then her tone shifted to something sweet and fake. Brad said someone showed up to inspect the roof. Did they stop by already? I didn't let him in, I replied. I am not letting anyone else in. Emma exhaled like I was a child throwing a tantrum. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. You know we're trying to help you. No, I said, you're trying to help yourselves. Her voice got sharper. You're being selfish. Brad has put in weeks lining this up, and we already made arrangements for your transition. I'm not going anywhere. There was a long silence. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. Well, maybe we'll just have to take this to court. That's when I hung up. I didn't say another word. I just ended the call and stood in my kitchen for a full minute staring at the calendar on the fridge. The last thing she said wasn't a threat. It was a promise the next day. I found out she meant it. A letter came via certified mail from a law firm I'd never heard of. It wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. It was a formal inquiry regarding power of attorney and financial guardianship. According to their letter, Emma and Brad had concerns about my ability to manage my affairs and were exploring legal options to ensure her safety and well-being. I sat at the table holding that letter for a long time. My hands didn't shake, but my stomach turned. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even afraid. I was just furious. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. That evening, I called Marla again. She didn't sound surprised either. They're trying to build a case that you're mentally unfit, she said. They can't just take over your finances on a whim, but if they can convince a judge that you're forgetful, confused, or a danger to yourself, they could try to get temporary conservatorship. From there, they could start liquidating assets in your name. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, what do I do? You document everything and you let me handle the rest, she said. And starting tomorrow, we begin. Preemptive filings. You're not incompetent. You've got all your records. And you've already protected the house. But from here on, you treat them like strangers. You don't let them in. You don't sign anything. And you don't meet with anyone without me present. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Understood. After that, I took Marla's advice seriously. I installed a camera doorbell. I locked every file cabinet in the house. I moved all my bank accounts to a local credit union and took Brad off the emergency contact list at my pharmacy. He never should have been on it to begin with. But back when Emma asked me to list him, she said it was just in case. I didn't. Fight her then. That was my mistake. On the following Saturday, I went to the grocery store. I parked in the usual spot. I was putting my bags into the trunk when I heard someone behind me. Mom, it was Emma. She wasn't smiling. Her arms were crossed and her jaw was tight. I need to talk to you. I didn't respond. We don't want to fight, she said. But you're forcing us to take steps. Brad says you're not well. And, Mom, I don't want to say this, but you've been acting erratically. You're putting the house at risk. It's not your house, I said. It will be she. Snapped, forgetting herself. Or it would have been if you hadn't acted like this. That told me everything I needed to know. The sale wasn't just a backup plan. They had already counted on the money. Spent it? Probably. Brad's debt wasn't just a problem, it was a hole he'd dragged her into. I'm not giving you anything, I said quietly. Not now, not ever. Emma looked around like she expected someone to intervene. Maybe she thought I'd cause a scene. I didn't. I just closed the trunk, got in the car, and drove away. By the time I got home, she'd texted me 6 times. You're blowing this out of proportion. We were just trying to help you downsize. If you don't trust me, we can get a mediator. Brad is furious, Mom. He thinks you're being cruel. We have no choice now. Don't make us do this legally. Didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I emailed Marla copies of the letter and the texts. Then I poured myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the wind move through the trees in my backyard. I didn't know what would happen next. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Let them come. It was the 3rd morning in a row I woke up before sunrise, and not because I couldn't sleep. It had become a routine now, putting on a pot of coffee, checking the front porch for suspicious envelopes, reviewing my calendar for any court-related deadlines Marla sent me, and logging everything. My kitchen table no longer held placemats or centerpieces. Now it held folders, manila envelopes, a notepad, my old landline phone, and 3 pens with half their ink drained. I wasn't living anymore, I was defending. And that morning, something new arrived. A letter taped directly to my mailbox, no envelope, no postage. Just a folded sheet of paper with my name scrawled across it in a handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it carefully. Scheduled inspection on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Final walkthrough required prior to close. No signature, no phone number. Just that I stood on my porch holding the note, my chest tightening. It wasn't even a surprise. Anymore, they were still acting like this house was theirs to sell. Like I was already gone. I went inside and called Marla. She answered on the second ring. "They're still trying to push the sale," I said. "I just got another inspection. Notice hand-delivered this time," she sighed. "They're getting desperate." "Did it have a name or company listed?" "No, nothing." "Okay, don't panic. We're filing the cease and desist today. I'll draft a formal notice to the agency we believe is involved. But I'm also going to make a few calls and find out who this inspector is." Marla worked quickly. By 4 p.m. that afternoon, she emailed me a name. Dennis Kelsey, independent contractor. Worked mostly on referral. She included a photo. I saved it to my phone. Tuesday came. I was dressed and waiting by 9:45. I didn't want to answer the door in my robe and give anyone ammunition about my condition. Sure enough, at exactly 10:02 a.m., a red pickup pulled up in front of my house. A tall, balding man got out, clipboard in hand. 'Twas Dennis Kelsey. Same face, same smile from the photo Marla had sent. He didn't knock. Instead, he circled the property first, scribbling on his clipboard. Then finally walked up and knocked once sharp and loud. I opened the door but didn't unhook the chain. "Yes, here for the inspection." "Inspection of what?" Squinted at his clipboard. "Buyer's final walkthrough. Cash deal. Closing Friday." "There's no closing," I said. "This house is not for sale." He blinked. "I've got paperwork here says otherwise." "Who signed the authorization?" He flipped through the pages, then paused. "Bradley Kinsey." I nodded. "Not the owner." "Ma'am, this house is owned by a trust. I'm the sole trustee. Bradley Kinsey has no legal rights to this property." He stood there, clearly uncomfortable. I was told the homeowner was elderly and unable to manage the process. "I've been in contact with the listing agent." "There is no listing agent," I said. "You need to leave now. And if you set foot on this property, I will call the police." His jaw twitched, but he took a step back. "Understood?" As he walked away, I took a photo of him with my phone. And another of his truck's license plate. By the time he drove off, I'd already emailed everything to Marla. 2 hours later, she responded. That was the last straw. "We're filing the formal injunction." That afternoon, I received a second call, this time from the real estate agency itself. A woman named Melinda called to apologize for the confusion, saying it was a clerical error and that they would cancel the listing. I didn't believe a word of it. I asked her how long the listing had been active. She paused, then said, "Just under 6 weeks. 6 weeks." Long before Emma and Brad sat me down in my own living room and pretended like this was all a sudden decision. They had listed my house without telling me, without asking me, without warning me. All while smiling to my face, I thanked her coldly and hung up. That night, I pulled out the last voicemail I had from my husband. It was from 2 years before he passed. Just his voice saying he'd be home late and to leave the porch light on. Listened to it twice. Then I went to bed without turning on the porch light at all. The next morning, I got a call from Emma. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was tight, clipped, rehearsed. "Mom, I just heard there was some kind of misunderstanding with the inspector. We didn't mean to alarm you. We were just trying to help get things in order. I wish you'd let us explain. But if you don't answer, you're giving us no choice. We're worried about your well-being. We'll have to involve someone who can step in and assess the situation objectively." I forwarded the voicemail to Marla. Then I called my doctor. Dr. Patel had been my primary care physician for 8 years. He knew my history, my medications, my appointments, and my memory. I asked him to write a statement regarding my mental and cognitive fitness. He didn't hesitate. "I'll fax it to your lawyer today." he said. I hung up and exhaled. I wasn't losing this house. I wasn't losing my autonomy, and I wasn't going to let my daughter and her husband steamroll me out of my own life. 2 days later, received an email from Marla. Injunction filed. You're protected. They can't proceed with the sale, can't authorize inspections, and can't pursue guardianship without filing in open court, and they'll lose. I read that email 4 times. The silence from Emma after that was almost deafening. I didn't hear from her for days. Then one afternoon, a black car pulled into my driveway. I watched from behind the curtains. She stepped out alone. She didn't come to the door. She stood at the edge of the porch for a full minute. Then walked back to her car. No knock, no apology, no shame either. Just silence. And for the first time, I realized I preferred it that way. It had been nearly 10 days since Emma stood on my porch and left without knocking. Since then, there had been nothing. No calls, no emails, no surprise inspections, no suspicious strangers claiming to be contractors. Just complete, unsettling silence. I didn't trust it. Emma never stayed quiet this long unless she was building. Something behind the scenes. On the 11th morning, a letter arrived not typed. Not official looking, but handwritten in a tight, messy script I recognized instantly. It was hers. Mom, I don't know what happened. I don't know how we ended. Up like this. I just want to talk face to face. No lawyers, no accusations. Kay, come by Sunday afternoon. Promise I won't stay long. Emma. There was no return address. No date. Just that I stared at it for a long time. Arla had warned me not to engage with either of them without documentation or a third party present. But part of me may be the part that still remembered tucking her in at night. Packing her lunches, waiting at the bottom of the stairs for prom pictures, needed to see her one last time. To hear from her directly, no lies, no papers, no performances. So, I agreed. I called Marla first. If she shows up, I told her I'll keep the door open and my phone recording. No physical contact, no signing anything, no offers, just listening. Marla was hesitant, but she understood. Be careful, she said. People who are losing control will say anything to get it back. Sunday came. I cleaned the living room not for her, but for me. I wanted the house to feel normal. I made tea, set 2 mugs out, but only poured one. Hers stayed empty. She arrived at exactly 2 p.m. sharp, just like when she was a teenager. Always rushing to seem responsible. She knocked this time. When I opened the door, she gave me a cautious smile. Her eyes were red. Either she had been crying or she wanted me to think she had. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup. She was trying to look small, maybe softer. Hi, Mom. I stepped aside. You have 15 minutes. Seat and sit. Just stood near the door, arms crossed. I just want to fix this, she began. You can't, I replied. It's done. She nodded slowly, like she expected that. Look, I know you think Brad and I were trying to hurt you, but that's not true. We were scared. Things have been rough for us, and we made some bad decisions. I'll admit that. But you shutting us out like this, it's too much. I raised my eyebrows. Too much. Her voice cracked. You blocked my number. You filed an injunction. You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal. You used my name to list my house for sale, I said. You scheduled showings behind my back. You called an inspector and claimed I was mentally unfit. You tried to remove me from my home. Emma's mouth tightened. I was trying to protect you. No, I said calmly. You were trying to pay off Brad's poker debt. That's what started all this? She looked away. So what is this about? I asked. You didn't drive all the way here just to admit guilt? Emma swallowed. Brad and I, we're losing the condo. I nodded slowly. Of course you are. She stepped closer. We just need a short-term solution, just until things stabilize. You could lend us a little? I cut her off. Absolutely. Not. Her face hardened. So that's it. You're just done with us? No, I said. You were done with me the day you handed that buyer a key to my house. Her jaw clenched. We didn't think it would go this far. It did, I said, and you thought I would roll over, like I always have. Emma looked around the room. I could see the calculation in her eyes. She wasn't listening anymore. She was searching, scanning for anything of value. Art on the wall. Silverware on the shelf. The same way Brad looked at everything when she finally met my eyes again. She would drop the performance. You're going to regret this, Mom. There it was. Not sadness, not remorse. It's control slipping. I stepped toward the door and held it open. Your time is up. She hesitated, then walked past me. At the edge of the porch, she turned. Brad says if you won't help us, he'll find another way. I didn't respond, just closed the door. This time, I locked it. An hour later, I sent the audio recording of our conversation to Marla. She replied immediately. That last line from her? That's a threat. We'll file a notice of harassment on Monday. I didn't sleep much that night, not from fear, but from frustration. I kept playing the conversation back in my head. Emma hadn't come to apologize. She hadn't even come to explain. She came to pressure me, to fish. To see if there was still a crack she could slip through, but they're WASN single quotes. The next morning, I noticed my mailbox was bent. Not much, but enough to look like someone had kicked it or slammed it shut too hard. I took a photo, just in case. Then the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from a man who identified himself as, an independent mediator working with families experiencing housing transitions. He said he had been referred by a family member and that he wanted to offer solutions for everyone's peace of mind. I forwarded the message to Marla. She confirmed this was another attempt to get access. That evening, I decided to take a different kind of step. I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and wrote an email to my local police department. Nothing dramatic. Just a statement explaining the situation along with the case number Marla had filed for the injunction. I asked them to add a note to their patrol watch in case anything suspicious happened around my property. The officer who responded was professional and kind. He thanked me for the detailed record and assured me they'd keep an eye on things. We see this more often than you'd think, he wrote. You did the right thing. The next 3 days passed without incident. Then, on Thursday afternoon, something happened that changed everything. I was bringing in groceries from the car when I noticed movement by the side gate. My heart jumped, but I stayed quiet. I walked back inside and turned on the side camera feed on my tablet. It wasn't high resolution, but it was clear enough, Brad. Standing in the side yard, wearing a ball cap pulled low. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't calling out. He was measuring. He had a small measuring wheel and a clipboard. He paced along the fence, taking notes. I called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, 10 minutes later, it was gone. But I had the footage. I gave them a copy and filed a report for trespassing. Marla called that night and told me this was it enough to push for a restraining order. They're not just being manipulative anymore, she said. They're escalating. I didn't argue. I agreed I wasn't going to wait until they pushed harder the next day. We filed the paperwork, and that night, for the first time in years, I moved the dresser in front of the front door. Not because I was afraid of what they'd take, but because I finally knew what I was protecting. The restraining order was approved faster than I expected. Maybe because the officers had seen the video of Brad walking along the side of my house. Maybe because the report was so detailed. Maybe because I had done everything right, documented, recorded, filed. Whatever the reason, it was official by Monday morning. Neither Brad nor Emma could come within 100 feet of my property, my workplace, or even my church. I thought that would be enough to keep them away. It WASN single quotes too. 2 days later, I received a notice from the county assessor's office. It was an alert about a pending property value reassessment, triggered by reported renovations and potential change in ownership. That was impossible. There had been no renovations, no changes of ownership. Not since I placed the house in the trust. And even if someone had tried to file something, I would have been notified first unless they were filing as me. I called the assessor's office and asked for clarification. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. We received documentation indicating the home had been sold privately to a family member, she explained. It includes a signed declaration, notarized, dated 2 weeks ago. I didn't sign anything, I said. I understand, she said carefully. But the system recognizes notarized documents as valid unless proven fraudulent. If this is a case of forgery, you'll need to file an affidavit immediately. I hung up and called Marla. She was already one step ahead. I'm looking at the documents now, she said. Brad submitted them under your name. They forged your signature and attached an old notary stamp from a previous refinance. They're trying to override the trust by pretending you did a direct family transfer. Can they? No, it won't hold up. Forgery, fraud, and abuse of process. We'll press charges. My voice was flat. Do it. That evening, I sat down at the kitchen table and reread every note I had taken since this started. Over 30 pages in one spiral notebook. Every phone call, every message, every attempt. I had to read them to remember how we got here. 'Cause, in moments of weakness, usually late at night, I still had thoughts I hated myself for having. Maybe you overreacted. Maybe they weren't trying to hurt you. Maybe Emma didn't know how far Brad would go. But those thoughts didn't survive long. Not when I reminded myself what they'd done. Not when I looked at the footage, the listings, the inspector, the forged sale, the manipulation, and now fraud. Marla filed a motion with the district attorney's office and copied the local law enforcement unit on elder abuse and financial exploitation. Even though I wasn't technically incapacitated or in a nursing facility, the laws in our state were clear. Any attempt to gain access to property or funds from a senior citizen through coercion, fraud, or forged documents qualified. That was the legal part. The personal part came later that night. It was nearly 11 p.m. when I heard a sound outside. A short metallic click, like something pressing against the side gate. I turned off the lights and walked quietly to the back window. There he was. Brad again. He wasn't measuring this time. He was trying to cut the padlock off. My side gate with bolt cutters. I didn't freeze. I called the police while I was still watching him. He had 1 foot through the gate when the first patrol car turned onto my street. The headlights lit him up like a spotlight, and he stumbled back, dropping the cutters. He ran to his car, but they blocked him in. The second patrol car came from the opposite end. They arrested him on the spot. Trespassing, violation of a restraining order, attempted unlawful entry. And when they searched his car, they found copies of the forged deed and a folder labeled Sell FAST Docs. I watched from inside as they cuffed him. His face was bright red, not from shame, from anger. He shouted something toward the house, but the officers shut the door before I could hear him. I didn't open the door. I didn't say anything. I just stood there watching the flashing lights bounce off my living room walls. The next morning, Emma called from a different number. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, I didn't know he was going to do that. I swear I didn't. Please don't let them take him to jail. He just panicked. He wasn't thinking. We've lost everything already. I'm begging you, please don't press charges. Sting delete. The message. I forwarded it to Marla, then I blocked the number. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the court. Brad had been charged with multiple counts. He was released on bond, but he was under strict orders to stay away from me and the property. Emma didn't try to call again. Instead, she sent an email. It was long, full of excuses, apologies, vague memories of better times. She said she was going through a lot emotionally and that I had always been her rock. She begged for a chance to talk in person. Without lawyers, without judges, just us. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Marla. I didn't read it again. The following week, I replaced every lock on the house. I installed motion detectors on all the doors and cameras inside the garage. I changed my mailing address to a P.O. box, and I hired a security company to do random drive-bys twice a week. It wasn't paranoia, it was experience. They had already shown me what they were capable of. I wasn't going to let them try again, but what I didn't expect, what I wasn't prepared for, was the message that came from someone else entirely. A woman named Rebecca left a voicemail on my landline. She introduced herself as Brad's sister. I had never met her. "Hi, I hope this isn't out of line. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry for what my brother has done. I don't talk to him much anymore, and I don't agree with what's been happening. But I saw your name come up on the court notice and figured you might want someone to know that not everyone in the family is like him." I called her back. We spoke for nearly an hour. She told me stories about Brad's past, his gambling, his lies, the time he forged their mother's signature on a refinance loan, the time he took out a credit card in her name. She said Emma used to be different, that she used to be kind. I didn't cry, but I thanked her. Because for the first time since all this started, someone had looked at me and said, "This isn't your fault." That night, I slept with my phone off for the first time in months. I didn't check my cameras. I didn't sit up in the living room waiting for movement. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and let myself rest. Because for the first time, I knew I had done everything I could. I had drawn the line and they had crossed it. 3 weeks after Brad was arrested, the district attorney's office called me in for a follow-up. It wasn't in a courtroom and it wasn't dramatic. Just a small office in a downtown building with a neutral rug and 2 chairs that squeaked every time you shifted. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s named Jessica, greeted me kindly and asked if I'd be willing to submit a formal statement to support the charges moving forward. I said yes without hesitation. I brought my folders. I brought the emails, the photos, the audio recordings, the video of Brad measuring the fence line, and even Emma's letter begging me not to press charges. Jessica didn't interrupt once. She let me explain every step, every day, everything that had been done behind my back. When I finished, she said something I wasn't expecting. "You've done more to protect yourself than most people do in time to stop this. You should be proud." I didn't feel proud. I felt tired, but I nodded. "What happens now?" She explained that with the evidence I provided, they were filing a formal criminal case against Brad not just for the trespassing or violation of the restraining order, but for felony forgery, attempted fraud, and elder exploitation. He could face real time. Emma hadn't been charged yet, but the DA's office was investigating her role. That included her knowledge of the forged documents, the realtor communications, and the inspections. If she was directly involved, she'd be included in the charges. I left the office with a folder full of copies and an overwhelming sense that something final had begun. That night, I didn't hear from Emma, but the following morning she called. I didn't pick up. She called again and again. Eventually, she left a voicemail. "I know you're angry. I know you think this is justice, but it's not. You're just tearing the family apart. We've already lost everything. If you send him to prison, I lose my husband. Our child loses her father. Is that what you want?" I didn't even know they had a child. I played the message back twice. There was no mention of a name, an age, nothing that made it feel real. It's just another pressure tactic. Another way to make me feel guilty. But it didn't work. I sent the voicemail to Marla. Then I sat in my kitchen looking out at my yard. The same yard Brad had tried to trespass through. The same porch Emma had stood on. It's full of fake apologies and unfinished threats. And I made a decision. I picked up the phone and dialed the number 1. It kept tucked in a drawer since all of this started. The attorney who managed my husband's estate? He'd retired, yes, but his daughter, also an attorney, was now working full-time with elder clients. We'd spoken before, but only to set up the trust. This time, I wanted to go further. "I want to revise my will," I told her. She asked me who I currently had listed. My daughter, I said. Emma. She didn't say anything, just waited. I want her removed completely. Everything goes to the community fund, the animal shelter, and my church. And if she contests, I want language in there to make sure she gets nothing. We met 2 days later and completed the paperwork. It was simple, cold, efficient. When I walked out of that office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. The next morning, I made one final call. I waited until 8:30 a.m. when I knew Emma would be awake, but not yet at work. I used the landline, the only number she still picked up. She answered on the first ring. Mom, I need you to listen, I said calmly. This is the last time we speak. Wait, Mom, I need you to understand that everything that's happened is because of the choices you made. You forged documents. You violated my trust. You tried to take my home. And Brad, he escalated it to a crime, not me. She was already crying. Or pretending to. You're tearing the family apart, she said. No, I said, you already did that. I just refuse to let you bury me alive in the process. Mom, please, we can fix this. You can't fix what you chose. To destroy. Silence. Then I said the part she'd never forget. You forgot the house wasn't yours. You forgot the money wasn't yours. You forgot I wasn't yours to control. And now, everything you thought you had lined up, everything you assumed would come to you by default, it's gone. The house, the inheritance, the future you were banking on. You wouldn't do that, she said. Her voice shook now. Not from emotion. From realization, I already did, I said, and I hung up. I stood there in the kitchen, one hand on the counter, breathing steady. No shaking, no second thoughts. For once, Emma was speechless. For the next 2 days, I got a string of missed calls, all blocked, all ignored. She never came by again. Neither did Brad. A month later, I was invited to speak at a community meeting for elder protection and estate planning. I didn't give details, just shared advice. Document everything. Say no when you mean it, but don't assume family means loyalty. I left the meeting with 3 new phone numbers from women who'd lived through similar betrayals. We had coffee. We talked. We weren't victims anymore. We were just people who had learned how to say enough. That was 6 months ago. Today, my house is still mine. Kay, my name is still on the mailbox. The trust is airtight. Kay, the will is ironclad. And the silence from my daughter. That's just fine by me, because some call some choices they echo for. Life. And Emma's. Be hearing that one for a long, long time.